Well, hello, friends. This here's David Vose. Today is April the 25th, 2015. It's great to see everybody today. I have some interesting information. Well, actually, it's far more than just interesting. This is flat amazing, and I think this particular video is going to shock many of you and interest you and captivate you, and not only for your mind but for your body, because this is going to tell you how we can live virtually forever, how this knowledge has been hidden from us, and the knowledge was found right there in the Sumerian tablets, and it's in the Bible as well. But this information is powerful, friends. I'm about to tell you what the elixir of the gods is, how they use it, why, and how they've kept it from us. This entire world that we live in, I'm going to show you how everything you've ever been taught is a lie. And why is it a lie? What are they trying to do? What is the purpose? Why would some beings come from some other planet and all the way with all this technology and come here? And what would be the reason for people that have all this advanced knowledge to come to another planet and subjugate them and put them in, slavery? Why? Wouldn't they be more benevolent, having advanced this far in technology? What would be the reason for taking mankind over and subjugating us? Well, friends, the answer is going to be given here in this video. There is a reason that is so powerful. Once you hear it, you'll know beyond any shadow of a doubt that it's true, because we can prove and verify that this is true. The history that we've been given is true, and the things that they've said in that history can be verified as true. But there's a whole bunch of this story that we're just not being told, and we're ignoring because we're still trying to get our mind around all this. It's like, okay, they're these gods from the other planets. They came here and they made us slaves, and they did this and they did that, and they messed with our DNA. But why? Well, the story tells you why. I don't know why. If you read a novel, most people would sit there and they'd be fascinated, this beautiful novel and adventures and all this stuff, and you would grasp by the end of the novel why the things that happened. But you'd have to wait to the end of the book. I think most people just don't read the whole story. They never get to the end of the story to find out why. But all along the story, it's telling you what they're doing. So, friends, stay tuned, and let's dig into this, and let's find out what this elixir of the gods really is and why they're keeping it from us. These people have been coming to the earth for thousands of years, according to our story. The Anunnaki in the Sumerian tablets came here originally to get gold, because on their world, on Nippur, there was something happened with their atmosphere. There was like a hole or a breach in it, and they had to use gold. Now, I've also found that this is something we haven't talked about, but when they arrived here, they found that they were aging much faster. And one of the reasons was because they were close to the sun and they were getting all this radiation. And the radiation is what made them age faster. So this is kind of, interesting, because it's true that when we are exposed to radiation, we die faster. And, there's all kinds of reasons for that. But what's interesting is that on their planet, they were trying to put gold in the atmosphere. No, it doesn't explain in great detail why they would be putting gold there. But later on in the Sumerian tablets, it explains that they would use this elixir. And this is talked about throughout different books and ancient writings, and there's a lot of speculation going on about this, that they used to take the gold and they would pound it into this some sort of powder, and they would drink it, and it would make them last. It would make them age much slower. This is something that, I'm not a scientist. I'm not somebody who's studied this extensively. But any of you can go onto the internet and start looking this up, and you'll find that, well, I mean, one of the things is that modern times now today, there are all these people that are using this colloidal silver, colloidal gold, and they're making all these claims about what it does for you. There are certainly a lot of people that are beginning to say that one of the reasons that we are not very healthy, and perhaps why we age, is because we don't have enough minerals in our body. But I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. But what I want to get at to begin with here is that these gods came to this earth primarily and specifically to get gold, because they had actually mined most of the gold on their planet, and they didn't have any more, and they couldn't fill this breach. Now, most people don't really stop to think about why they had this lack of minerals on their planet. Remember, they lived hundreds of thousands of years. And so their history goes back. I mean, the Sumerian tablets is saying, and the Egyptian tablets and all of these, Babylonian cuneiform writings and things that we've been digging up, and we've known this for a long time, says that our Earth goes back 400,000, in excess of 400,000 years. That's just the history of these Anunnaki while they were on this Earth, and how they began to manipulate the human beings that were here, and the seed growth and the plantations and the world that we live in. They've completely manipulated it for hundreds of thousands of years. And they've used us as slaves all this time, and they're still doing it now. But what I want to say here at this point is that imagine then how long the history of Nibiru might be. Because there's never been a book written about all their history. Perhaps could go back for millions and millions of years. So we might assume then that they had already mined the gold and silver and all the metals out of their planet. Because I think it's reasonable to assume that most any planet would have basically the same minerals. Any physical planet, such as our own, would have all these minerals, would have water, would have gold, would have nickel, would have all of these types of minerals, and perhaps not in the exact ratio that we have here on the earth, but at least we could imagine that they probably had gold, or whatever it was that that caused life to be proficient on their planet. There had to have been a reason. They were thriving at some point. What happened that stopped their world from thriving? What caused this breach in their atmosphere? Now, I know part of the reason for this, obviously, is that there was some sort of, they talked about Tiamat, and it has this collision with Nibiru. So they talk about that as though that was the reason for the breach in their atmosphere. In fact, according to the Sumerian tablets, that's the reason that Mars doesn't have an atmosphere now. There was a civilization there run by Marduk, one of these ancient gods, and he had the Iji that lived there. And they also lived in South Africa for a period of time. But at some point they were stationed on Mars, and they had a thriving civilization there. And evidently at that time there was air and trees and water and everything there, and had been for millions of years. But at this point where there was collision that created the asteroid belt happened, it took away the air from Mars. So now if we go up there, we just see a dead planet, because there were civilizations there. You might see pyramids and ancient civilization that once existed, but it's gone. They had to abandon ship. So that could be the entire reason. But I think also that there's more to this story. I mean, nobody wants to make their history appear to say that they just blew it. So they might want to blame this whole thing on some sort of collision. But I wonder why they're so intent on getting minerals. I think that this breach in their atmosphere may have been caused by other reasons than just some, because it seems to me like if a planet or a civilization had some air and things were growing and things were okay, why would that? I mean, if they're going to lose some of their atmosphere, it seems like they would either lose it or don't lose it. It wouldn't seem like they would just be barely hanging on, and they would have to keep putting gold in the atmosphere, little small flakes of gold or something. I think, and of course, what I'm saying is that the gold was obviously being used not only to keep the air. It wouldn't be necessarily to keep the air in, but to keep the radiation out. That hole in the atmosphere may be something more like the hole that we've got here on this Earth now, which is the ozone layer, which is, keeping ultraviolet rays out and giving us more radiation. And one of the reasons that they came here to get the gold is they didn't want to die. They didn't want to age faster. They were trying to put that up there to keep that radiation out of their planet. And so they came here. Isn't it interesting that human beings in ancient times lived to be hundreds of years old? And we don't know, perhaps, and that's only 6,000 years ago. But according to Sumerian tablets, beings that were on this earth 100,000 years ago or more may have lived even longer lifespans than that. What has happened to our earth that we no longer live hundreds and perhaps thousands of years, but now we're down to living 70 to 100 years? Is it the radiation levels? And is it because these beings have come here and mined our gold and have taken it out of our soils? A lot of you are probably aware of the fact that most people are saying we're not getting enough minerals in our food and our diet. Why? Well, the biggest reason that we always tout is that the farmers are going out here and they're planting crops and they're using the same soil. And they just every year plant more crops there. And they never let the land just be to rest, to let the trees grow up and then fall and die and make mulch and where the rain come down and put it. So the minerals and the rich soil never gets to occur. It just keeps getting used, and they just put a little sulfur on the soil as like some as a fertilizer, but they don't put back in the soil all of the things that the soil would need. They don't put minerals. Farmers don't go out there and spread gold all over their fields. They don't spread nickel. They don't spread vitamins and nutrients and so forth. They're just putting back some of the fertilizers that would make it grow big and strong. So most of the food that we're eating is lacking a whole lot of this stuff that used to be there thousands of years ago. But it may not just be that reason. I mean, minerals are hard to deplete in the soil. One of the, well, I would say the largest and perhaps the only major way to lose the minerals in our soil would be to extract those minerals, to mine them. If there were beings that were on this earth that were mining tons and tons of gold for thousands and perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, then you can imagine how our world would be lacking in minerals at this point, and why perhaps our lifespan now is only 100 years. But imagine then We don't know how many tons of gold that they would mine each year, but we know that it's many tons. You know, I mean, I doubt whether the gods and all their technological abilities, they were able to, have spaceships and far more technology than we have today, that they had 400,000 or 500,000 years ago, because they had enough technology then to come clear off from their planet to ours. They had some kind of very highly advanced technology. So when they were mining on the Earth 400,000 years ago, they were probably mining a lot of gold, silver, copper. I mean, I'm sure that they mined all of the metals, took all of our resources, and have been doing it and raping our planet for 400,000, 500,000 years. Now, I looked up how much gold was being mined today, and I found out that there's a lot of discrepancy. But what I found out is that there are basically 2,000, 2,500 tons of gold that is mined out of our Earth. Just the gold. We're not talking about silver, copper, anything else. But 2,500 is what they're admitting. I did some more research. 2,500 tons each year. I did some more research, and I found out that this may be very, very low figure, because of the fact that there is these mining operations going on that they're not being reported. They don't report to the government what they're doing, and there's no records being kept. And I thought to myself, this is amazing, because if there really is these mines going on all around the world that nobody's recording, and there's no account, where is this going? Well, you could imagine for a moment that maybe the Rothschilds, are mining this gold and then sticking it in their coffers. Well, if they've been doing that for 100 years, they must have a lot of gold, huh? More than anyone else on Earth, and what they do. But they don't need that method to become the most wealthy beings in the world. I mean, certainly when the Crusaders and all the, military apparatuses of all these countries went in, they took gold that had been there anciently and they stored it. The Catholic Church has tons and tons of gold. The English, the British, when they went in and conquered kingdoms, they took all the gold. I mean, they could just, because they're the world power, they could have all the gold in the world. They don't necessarily need to be mining it every day. But they are. Somebody is. I wouldn't think that it's some plumber down here on the, 4th and Vine that's mining this gold that's not being recorded. Whoever's doing it must be somebody that's got not only the ability to evade their governments, but somehow the power to evade governments, because the government's not going to let some guy mine tons of gold out of the ground without having records. They're going to want to regulate that. I mean, I'm sure that people in the government, being corrupt as they are, they're going to want to get in on that. If they can't get in on it, then they must be of less power than the people that's doing the mining. So they've admitted, if you look this up, go on to Google and do some research, you'll see that there's a bunch of gold being mined in the world that there are no records for. So this figure of 2,000, 2,500 tons of gold every year is far lower. We have no idea how much gold. But using that figure alone, they have said that there's about 165,000 tons of gold in the world. All right, and that does not explain, that 165,000 tons is not that much gold. I mean, it's a lot of gold, right? But people are saying, well, that's a lot of gold, but it's not that much, right? We're using half of that for jewelry, which, me personally, I think that's a little hard to understand. Because remember, gold never goes away. It doesn't rot. It's not like paper, or it doesn't corrupt. It doesn't, it's all the gold that's ever been mined on the earth is still here somewhere. A few rings or something might have been lost, or a few coins back into the earth. But for the most part, all the gold that's ever been mined has got to be here somewhere. And they're just counting back 6,000 years. And yet I know, and the truth is, that we've been mining gold ferociously for 400,000 or 500,000 years. So, I mean, the amount of gold that if it was still on the earth, that all that they've been mining would be far, far, far more than 165,000 tons of gold, just using their own figures. And, of course, their figure would be very low, because they're only assuming that somebody went out there with a loincloth and a shovel and tried mining gold for thousands of years, when in fact is that they've been having this help from the Nibiru and from these Anunnaki, and they've been doing this gold mining in ways that we haven't even imagined. I think that our world has so much gold, silver, and minerals in it that they've been mining literally perhaps 165,000 tons every year. I won't go that far, but only God knows how many tons of gold they have been mining from our planet, and silver and copper. Did you know that when you buy a gold ring, it's not gold? It's, they say it's 24 karat or 14 karat or something. That means that a large portion of that ring is made out of copper or silver or some other alloy. When you get a white gold ring, it's white because they use nickel and they use silver and aluminum, and that's why it turns white. So you see, the 50% of 2,500 tons every year that they say is going to jewelry, that would mean that the jewelry that they're creating with that 50% is something like 3, 4, 5 times more than that, with all the other alloys that they make and they mix into it. And a lot of jewelry that's just gold plated even. That would mean that the amount of rings and jewelry being created on this earth would be literally in the multi-thousands of tons. And I cannot believe that, friends. I know that there are 7, billion people on the world, on the earth, but not every one of those people are out buying rings every year. There's only a handful of people who have enough money to run around, and every year they're buying gold rings. The poorest of the people don't have any rings. I don't have a gold ring. Now, there may be some people who have hundreds of gold rings, but they're very few. Most of the population, if they have a gold ring, and they've only got one, and that would not, and like I said, for thousands of years, these rings and all these coins and everything that's been created is still here somewhere. So why do we have a need for 50% of all the world's gold to be made into rings, and those and then add copper and silver and everything else to that? You've got tons and tons of jewelry. I understand people buy a lot of jewelry, but the jewelry can't just, I suppose some of the cheap jewelry gets thrown away, but the precious jewelry made out of gold doesn't just get thrown away. What's happening? There must be, they must be lying to us. I don't think they're making all of this gold into jewelry. But like I say, it must get worse. It must be much worse than this, because that's only what they're telling us that they're mining. And they're actually admitting that there are many mines all around the world that's not being recorded and added to their little thing. What I'm trying to say to you, friends, is that, the World Bank has no use for gold. I mean, there may be a certain amount of tonnage and stuff that's in the world reserves and stuff like that in the banks. But for the most part, they don't really care about that anymore. The IMF, just prints paper money, and our government prints paper money, and most of the governments do. They have very little use for gold as far as our economy. But somebody for thousands of years has had such high need for gold, and the Sumerian tablets tell us what their need was. They needed to take it back to save themselves, because they didn't want to die, because they could eat the gold, they could put it in their atmosphere. They were trying to keep the radiation away from them, and this was making them live longer. That might be one of the reasons why these beings live hundreds of thousands of years. But you see, this knowledge has never been given to human beings. Only recently are people running around taking this colloidal gold as a supplement. We don't know what it's going to do on a long-term basis. People have been doing this only for a few years now. Any numbers of people. And we don't know that drinking, tablespoons of colloidal gold and colloidal silver and all these minerals is really going to do as much as we might. It may not be the exact same potion or elixir that the gods used. Probably, definitely has been shown that it works, and it does get rid of diseases and keeps the immune system high and makes you live longer. But they added some other things. They have far more knowledge than we do. And they were using this gold for their atmosphere. And in the meantime, they're robbing planet Earth. And our lifespan now has gotten down to less than 100 years. And in the meantime, we're dying of all these terrible, wicked diseases, cancer and all of this stuff. It's been proven beyond any doubt that the reason we get cancer is because we don't have minerals in our body, which keeps the radiation out, which starts this process that, the cell division starts getting messed up and deforms and causes cancer. And that's the major reason why people die, that and heart disease. So without cancer and heart disease, we don't know how long the human race would live. But one thing's for very certain. There's a lot of gold being mined on this earth, and has been for hundreds of thousands of years. If you were to count, if they're claiming there's 165,000 tons of gold ever mined, and they're only counting 6,000 years, and they're only counting a small little amount of gold being mined from some Indian with his loincloth and a wooden shovel, if that's what they believe, then of course the figures of how much gold there's been mined on this earth must be many, many times more than what they're saying, just in the 6,000 years they're actually counting. And what about the 400,000 or 500,000 years that they've been mining the gold? When they first came here, the reason they came here from the Nibiru was to mine the gold. They've been mining it for over 400,000 years. So the amount of gold that's been mined from this earth has got to be not hundreds of thousands of tons, but millions and millions of tons. And all of that gold has been shipped off to the Anunnaki on another planet. Meanwhile, our Earth is dying. So friends, there's another reason why we've got to do something. And we can't just sit here and say, well, they're benevolent beings, they're not bothering anybody, they're helping us, they're giving us telephones, and they're giving us all kinds of wonderful technologies making our lives better. No, they're not, friends. They're killing us. And that's only one way that they're killing us. They've been destroying us and using us as slaves to mine gold for them, to make them live thousands of years. And meanwhile, we're dying. They don't need us to live very long, because the longer we live, the more we know. And they don't want any of us learning anything. All the knowledge that they've given us is only being used to mine the gold and to keep us in bondage. These little phones that they're giving us to communicate with each other is really just like a little experiment that you put in a cage with a rat. You hook a little electrode up to the rat's brain, and you hook that down to a little pleasure button, and you push that, and the mouse starts realizing they push that little red button, and they get pleasure. And it sends a volt, into their brains and goes into their little pleasure center in their nervous system, and it gives them pleasure. So they keep pushing that little button. They keep pushing that little button until the poor little rat dies. That's what's happening. They're giving us our burgers, putting poison in it. We love them. We eat them. Oh, that's great. It's our McDonald's and our Walmart. You go into Walmart, and what do you get? There's no food in there. It's sugar and chemicals and chips and candies and sodas. The only thing that they're doing with our slave labor, it's like a little wheel that, like the rat, goes round and round on the wheel to get exercise, but it doesn't go anywhere. We're on this little treadmill making cars so we can get in the car and drive to work, so we can pay for the car. It's a treadmill. It never goes anywhere. There's never any happiness. Our children are on drugs that they're feeding us. They grow up, they end up committing crimes and going to prison. Heartache, hurt, pain, bondage, and all of this to keep us down so we won't learn and we can't grow and we'll never get out of this prison that they've created for us, this matrix. And they put us under these laws and they say you can't do this and you can't do that or you're going to go to hell. And we hate you. See, we're God and we hate you. Well, it's not the truth, friends. The true God loves us. And he came here to deliver us from this. And the only way out, friends, is through the mind. We've got to stop believing in these beings and their laws and their bondage and their hate. Stop hating one another and judging one another and love one another and free your mind and let go of these carnal pleasures that it's like a rat race that's never going to get us anywhere. And we've got to expose these beings that are on our earth that are robbing our home and destroying us. So, friends, as you can see, everything in our world that we know, that we've just assumed is normal, really is insanity. And it only makes sense if we're being taught this by beings that want to keep us as slaves. And we know the reason why. Because they want to live. They want to live forever, or at least virtually forever. And the only way they can do that is with this gold and all the minerals that they've already raped and pillaged on their planet. So they came here for a purpose. They came here for the gold. And we are their slaves so that we can produce the gold for them. They don't want us to live very long. They only want us to work. And a good, one of the things you're going to mastermind and put into the DNA of somebody who's going to be your worker is that they were going to want to have lots of children and make sure they have lots of wives so they can have lots more children. And then make them slaves. This is the law that they put us under. The law of slavery and the law of property and the law of the caste system so that you know where you belong. And if you're of a certain, if you've got some of the Anunnaki blood, then you get to rule over. And they are ruled over by the higher Anunnaki. And the highest of the Anunnaki that live on the earth are ruled over by the planet Nippur. And it's controlled from the top down, and their only purpose is to get gold and minerals to ship back to their country. And they've got to keep us in darkness. They've got to make a law and a religion that makes us believe that this is all just perfectly normal. We've got to obey our masters. We've got to keep on working. He who does not work does not eat. And we've got to, make sure that we don't find out about this elixir so that we can live forever like they're getting. If we found out that we could put gold in the atmosphere and keep the radiation out of the earth, you see, you hear about all these chemtrails lately. Are they doing something to our atmosphere to keep us, somehow keep us alive? Because this planet is getting to the point where, there isn't hardly any minerals left. I think they're trying to keep us so that we only live a certain lifespan. And that way we'll never know what they're doing. And they're keeping us in bondage to this religion, to this Jewish religion of law. Thou shalt be a slave, thou shalt obey, and you get 1 day off. You work 6 and you get 1 day off. You got to keep working. All right. You make the money so you can buy yourself a car. No. That car so you can drive to work because they want you to go to work. You see, friends, it's all a big matrix to keep us in bondage so that we can be their slaves, so that we can make the gold and we can ship it to Nibiru so they can live forever. Friends, I think it's about time that we begin to figure out what's going on. It's about time to tell these guys to leave. Okay, their numbers have been, it's up, it's over. We know what they're doing now. And if we ever find out, they might try to destroy us. And that may be why our God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ is going to have to eventually come and save us. And there might be a war in heaven, because they're not going to like it too much if we get to be free. And they're probably not going to let go without a struggle. But friends, it's worth it, because we're dying here. And when we die, we end up coming back, because we can't let go in our minds. We can't be free. And that's why the Lord Jesus Christ set us free, friends. So tell everybody you know, because this is the most important thing they'll ever know. They've got to know what they're in bondage to so they can become free. And when you're free, the Lord Jesus Christ sets you free. You are free indeed, friends. So I hope this helps some of you out there. This here's David Vos, and I'm going to go ahead and sign out, guys. You guys have a great week.